The lights were bright, the music loud, and the audience clapped as the cameras started rolling. The view was live from New York City, and the tension backstage could almost be felt in the air. Jennifer Lopez walked out in a white suit, smiling, waving at the crowd, but her eyes were sharp. She was here to talk about her new Women's Leadership Project One, supported by the United Nations and focused on empowering young women across Latin America. She had been working on it for 2 years, flying between villages and cities, speaking with community leaders, and raising millions in donations. Sitting across from her, Gwyneth Paltrow looked calm. She wore a pale blue dress and a faint smile. She was there to discuss clean energy, her new partnership with Scandinavian governments, and her recent appointment as a climate ambassador for a U.S.-European sustainability initiative. The two women exchanged brief nods as the show began. The host, Sunny Hostin, introduced them with excitement. Today we're joined by two global icons, Jennifer Lopez, here to talk about her work in Latin America, and Gwyneth Paltrow, here to discuss international climate policy. Jennifer leaned in first. "This is not about fame," she said. "This is about real work, real change. Girls in Guatemala and Honduras are building futures because of programs like ours. I don't care about photo ops, care about results." The crowd applauded. Then Gwyneth spoke. "That's admirable," she said coolly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "But sometimes these kinds of celebrity initiatives are just PR dressing. Designed to keep someone looking relevant more than actually solving anything." There was a pause. The audience went quiet. Jennifer blinked. "Excuse me?" Gwyneth didn't flinch. "I'm not questioning your passion. I'm just saying the structure of these programs is often flawed, mismanaged, and sometimes, not everything is as clean as it looks on camera." The co-hosts shifted in their seats. A producer backstage leaned into a microphone and said, "Cut." To whoopee, shift tone, but the control room didn't act fast enough. Jennifer's voice dropped slightly. "I've worked with heads of state. I've walked through refugee camps. I've been in rooms where girls told me about being forced to drop out of school. So if you're suggesting this is just a PR game," Gwyneth cut in, "I'm suggesting people do their homework, especially before attaching their names to programs that may have hidden, let's say, complications." The word complications landed heavy. The studio air turned cold. Whoopi Goldberg jumped in. "Okay, ladies, let's keep it civil," but Jennifer wasn't finished. "What are you implying, Gwyneth? That I'm involved in something shady? I don't know what I'm doing?" Gwyneth gave a small shrug. "All I'm saying is sometimes people get involved in things they don't fully understand, or with people they shouldn't trust. That's all." Jennifer stared at her, eyes locked, lips pressed tight. "You don't know what I've seen." "No," Gwyneth replied, "but I know what I've read." There it was. Something unspoken had now been said out loud. Jennifer stood up. Her mic picked up her deep breath. "This is not how we support each other. Not as women. Not as leaders. I won't sit here and let you twist something I've worked so hard on into some ugly rumor." She turned, walked off the stage, heels clicking hard against the floor. The audience gasped. The camera tried to follow her, but the feed cut suddenly to commercial. Backstage, chaos erupted. The executive producer yelled into her headset, "What the hell was that? Did she just walk off?" Assistants scrambled. PR reps were on phones already. On Twitter, the clip hit instantly. Within 2 minutes, hashtags like #Lopez storms off and #PALTROW shade were trending. People picked sides. Some called Gwyneth a truth teller. Others called her a mean girl. Some accused Jennifer of being too emotional. Others praised her for standing her ground. But the real storm had just begun. An anonymous account posted a document, a photo of a funding report from Jennifer's NGO, with large red marks and a suspicious entry. Payment to a consulting firm that had once been blacklisted by the UN. Then came the video edits. Side-by-side footage of Jennifer in refugee camps next to Gwyneth at environmental forums. TikTok users debated who was the real global leader. YouTube commentators made hour-long breakdowns of the confrontation. And late-night shows were already writing jokes. By sunset, major networks like CNN and BBC were calling it one of the most uncomfortable live TV moments in years. Gwyneth, in a brief comment to the press outside the studio, said only, "Sometimes truth is uncomfortable." Jennifer remained silent. Inside the studio, Whoopi sat with her hands folded. She turned to the co-hosts during the break and said, "That wasn't a moment. That was a warning shot." They all nodded. Something deeper had just been exposed. Not just between two powerful women, but between two ways of wielding power. Something about image, influence, and truth. Something that wasn't over. Not even close. The clip had only aired for 3 minutes. But by the time The View returned, from commercial break, the world was already watching a wildfire spread. News anchors on CNN and MSNBC began replaying the exchange between Jennifer Lopez and Gwyneth Paltrow in loops. Twitter feeds were flooded. Hashtag Lopez storms off was now the #1 trending hashtag in the US, Mexico, and Brazil. Networks were translating every word with urgency. Gossip sites twisted the moment into headlines like Lopez meltdown or Paltrow provocation. While more serious outlets asked, was there truth behind Paltrow's on-air accusation? Backstage, Jennifer's team moved quickly. Her publicist, Karina Alvarez, was already on the phone with the UN Communications Office. Damage control. She whispered into her headset, "We need a joint statement. Deny any financial scandal. Push back now." But the UN was hesitant. They were receiving inquiries from European media already, asking about a specific consulting firm mentioned in one of Lopez's annual funding reports, Ralston Strategic Group, a name long buried after a failed USAID project in Honduras 5 years ago. Meanwhile, Gwyneth walked calmly through a back hallway of the studio, sipping water, followed by 2 silent staffers. A young producer approached her and whispered, "Gwyneth, the control room wants to know, was that planned?" She turned, slightly not breaking stride. "Truth doesn't need planning," she said, and kept walking. By the afternoon, both women had become the center of a political media firestorm. Gwyneth was invited to appear on BBC World News, where she defended her statement. "I didn't accuse Jennifer of anything," she said with a smooth voice. "I raised a question about how global aid is sometimes administered. That's not personal, that's responsible diplomacy." When asked if she had seen evidence of wrongdoing, she paused. "Let's just say I've seen enough to worry." That one line was enough to shift the tone across cable panels. Analysts debated whether Gwyneth, now holding a semi-official ambassadorial role, had been briefed by intelligence figures. Was this a coordinated political jab disguised as a celebrity feud? Across the Atlantic, at the UN headquarters in Geneva, a small crisis meeting was underway. Lopez's Women in the Rise initiative had been operating across 5 Latin American nations, offering grants, tech hubs, and education programs. Now officials were reviewing her program's audit logs. A suspicious transaction flagged in Panama appeared again. Funds routed through a third-party vendor with ties to a long-dormant security company. "I told them years ago," muttered a UN legal advisor. "Celebrity partnerships create backdoors. They draw the wrong kind of eyes." Jennifer, holed up in a Manhattan hotel, wasn't speaking publicly. She sat on a sofa, arms folded, her phone lighting up nonstop. Her sister Linda sat next to her, tears in her eyes. "You were doing good, Jen. They don't see that." "I let people into my space," Jennifer said quietly. "I let them manage the funds." The face. That's what they wanted. Her phone buzzed again, this time, a message from an unknown number. "Check Ralston's Panama branch. They're not the only one they used. Be careful." She stared at the screen. "They want to bury me," she whispered. That night, Anderson Cooper led CNN's primetime with a segment titled "Paltrow versus Lopez." a PR stunt, or a deeper rift in U.S. soft power. Analysts included a former CIA officer, a Latin American aid watchdog, and a media ethics professor. They debated the use of celebrities in diplomacy, how governments benefit from their influence. But the risks of uncontrolled partnerships could backfire. But then came a new twist. A leaked internal memo from the U.S. State Department surfaced. Online. Dated 2 months prior, it referenced an internal risk assessment of the Women in the Rise initiative. One line stood out in bold. Exposure risk, medium to high. Potential misuse of image by UN partner. No evidence of Lopez's direct involvement. The media pounced. Fox News ran the story with flashing banners. State Department flagged Lopez program weeks before Paltrow's outburst and asked if Gwyneth had access to that memo before appearing on The View. People began asking, had Gwyneth been briefed? Was she speaking for herself or for Washington? Jennifer's lawyer appeared on CBS Mornings the next day. Let's be clear, Ms. Lopez has no knowledge of the memo, nor was she ever briefed by the State Department. She was working in good faith with the UN. Any suggestion otherwise is deeply irresponsible. The jet roared as it cut through the sky above Panama. Marissa Klein sat by the window, her laptop open, headphones in. She wasn't a celebrity reporter. She wasn't interested in clickbait or fashion statements. She was an investigative journalist with Reuters, and what had started as a minor assignment to fact-check a UN funding discrepancy had now turned into something that felt like a trapdoor into a deeper world. The name Ralston Strategic Group kept appearing. On paper, it was a logistics firm hired to facilitate field operations for Jennifer Lopez's Women in the Rise initiative. But Ralston had no known offices, no public staff, and its website had gone offline a year ago. When Marissa checked deeper, she found an old procurement document linking Ralston to a disbanded private military contractor used by the CIA. During counter-drug operations in Colombia and Guatemala, she leaned back in her seat. Why would Jennifer Lopez's NGO, backed by the UN, be channeling funds through a company like that? In Panama City, Marissa met with 2 sources' former staffers who worked with the NGO before it was scaled up. One of them, who spoke under the condition of anonymity, admitted that Ralston handled security and transport for rural site visits. The man slid a file across the table, scanned invoices, emails, and one concerning receipt for $280,000. Marked Perimeter Services, Chiriquí Province. Who were they protecting Jennifer from? Marissa asked. The man hesitated. Wasn't about Jennifer, he finally said. It was about what was happening near the border. Land disputes. Mining interests. The program was helping women organize, and that made certain people nervous. Meanwhile, in New York, Jennifer sat in a dark room across from a TV screen, replaying Marissa's breaking report. There's no proof I knew, she told her sister, her voice low. I never saw those files. Karina Alvarez, now visibly shaken, answered, maybe you didn't, but they're about to make this your fault anyway. CNN picked up the Reuters report within hours. Lopez, NGO linked to suspicious contractor in Panama, read the Kieran. Gwyneth Paltrow, when asked to comment through her office, replied only, everything I said on The View, I said for a reason. At the UN, the Geneva office launched a preliminary review. Officials were furious not just at Jennifer, but at themselves. We gave her too much freedom. No oversight. No regular audits, muttered a senior compliance officer. But a UN whistleblower named Dr. Nadia El-Hashim went further. She emailed Marissa Klein directly, stating she had concerns about the Lopez program 6 months ago. She had seen emails between Ralston reps and a retired intelligence official who once served in Central America. I believe the program was compromised, she wrote. Not by Lopez directly, but by people embedded inside it. I warned Geneva. No one listened. Marissa set up a secure meeting, Dr. El-Hassim provided metadata from 2 internal emails, proving a man named Vincent DeRoa, former CIA logistics coordinator, had been advising Ralston's activities within the Women in the Rise initiative. The headline dropped within 48 hours, ex-CIA officer linked to NGO supporting Jennifer Lopez's work in Latin America. The reaction was explosive. Protesters appeared outside UN buildings in Mexico City, Quito, and La Paz, accusing Western institutions of weaponizing aid and using celebrity projects as cover for geopolitical agendas. President Gustavo Varela of Ecuador issued a blistering statement. Our people deserve real development, not influence games masked by Hollywood smiles. Inside the White House, senior advisors to the president met behind closed doors. The National Security Advisor was blunt. We need to get ahead of this. If it looks like we used Jennifer Lopez to run operations in Central America, whether she knew it or not, this could damage U.S. credibility across the region. The president did not issue a statement. Gwyneth, on the other hand, remained publicly composed. She gave a carefully crafted interview to the Financial Times in which she stated, "This is why I said what I said. I had access to risk assessments, saw things I couldn't ignore. No, I didn't plan to humiliate Jennifer, but someone had to say something." When pressed on whether she'd been briefed by intelligence agencies, she smiled and replied, "That's not a question I'm allowed to answer." Jennifer watched that clip again and again. "I need to speak," she said finally. Karina turned to her, worried. "You mean go public?" "No," Jennifer said. "I mean, I need to find out what the hell happened. Not through a lawyer. Not through PR. I want to talk to the reporter. Want to see the files." Arrangements were made. The meeting with Marissa Klein took place in a secure Midtown office owned by an international law firm. Jennifer arrived in a black coat, no makeup, her face pale but determined. Marissa laid out the documents, emails, flagged transfers, a full audit trail. Jennifer sat silently, studying them. Then she asked, "Why me? Why embed someone in my project?" Marissa replied carefully, "Because your face opened doors. Governments, diplomats, UN panels. You made things accessible and that made it useful to someone." Jennifer's hands were trembling slightly now. "And they thought I'd never look under the surface." Marissa looked at her. "Did you?" Jennifer said nothing for a long time. Then she whispered, "I wanted to believe I was doing something good. I was tired of being seen as just an entertainer. I wanted to matter." Marissa nodded. "You do. That's why they used you." The room was still. Jennifer leaned back. "This isn't over." "No," Marissa agreed. "It's just starting." Back in Panama, a woman named Lila Mendoza, former translator for the Women in the Rise program, watched everything from a hotel room. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "They know about Darrow. If you talk, make it count." She looked out the window toward the jungle, then picked up a USB drive from the table. Inside were hours of recorded meetings. Meetings Jennifer never knew were being taped. Meetings where men in suits discussed which villages to influence, which politicians to charm, and which journalists to silence. It was time to tell the world. The screen flickered as the camera feed sharpened. CNN had just aired a 15-minute expose based on Marissa Klein's findings. The footage was clinical audits, email headers, satellite images of remote NGO compounds in Panama and Honduras. Then came the voiceover. What began as a celebrity-led empowerment initiative is now suspected to have been infiltrated by a private intelligence network, operating quietly beneath the surface of goodwill. Jennifer Lopez sat in the back of a black SUV parked in a private garage in downtown Manhattan, her phone buzzing endlessly in her lap. Texts from friends, former colleagues, and reporters all flooded in. Some offered support. Others demanded answers. Karina Alvarez opened the car door. "They want you at CNN. Live interview. Anderson Cooper. Full hour. It's your chance to take control of the story." Jennifer looked exhausted. "Not going to sit there and beg for public sympathy," she said. "You don't need to. Karina said. But you need to speak before someone else does it for you. Across the country, in Los Angeles, Gwyneth Paltrow was already preparing for her own interview. Her team had booked a spot on PBS NewsHour, and the tone would be deliberate, lectual, clean, controlled. Gwyneth understood image better than anyone. She knew this wasn't about facts anymore. It was about narrative. But something was shifting beneath the surface. In Panama, Lila Mendoza, the translator who once worked side by side with Jennifer's team, was preparing to hand over recordings. She'd stayed silent for 2 years, fearing for her safety. But after seeing the news reports and Jennifer's quiet defiance, she had made her decision. She contacted Marissa. I have tapes, Lila said over a secure line. Private meetings. Some with Jennifer, most without. Some very dangerous people talking about how to shape outcomes. You need to hear them. That same night, Marissa flew back to Panama. In a dimly lit hotel room, Lila handed her a USB drive. This doesn't just involve Ralston, she said. There's a third actor. European, not public. They were using Jennifer to build influence in Latin America. Jennifer had no idea, but they were watching her. Marissa plugged in the drive. The first audio file began with chatter in Spanish and Geo staff discussing site logistics. Then a deeper voice entered. English male, American accent. We keep Lopez in the light. The rest operates in the shadow. Her image gets us in the door. That's all that matters. Another voice, British, colder. She doesn't need to know. Keep her focused on appearances. Let the analysts work behind her. Marissa sat frozen. This wasn't just a celebrity scandal. This was statecraft by deception. Back in New York, Jennifer arrived at CNN headquarters wearing a navy suit. No jewelry, her hair pulled back. She walked quietly through the hallway, past producers and camera crews. Anderson Cooper met her at the studio entrance. You ready? He asked. I don't know, she replied honestly. You don't have to convince anyone, he said. Just tell the truth. The segment went live. Anderson started with a gentle question. Why did you walk off The View, Jennifer? Jennifer looked into the camera. 'Cause I was blindsided. Because a colleague, someone I've admired, decided to smear years of work with one sentence. And because something told me. She knew more than she let on. Anderson leaned in. What do you know now? Jennifer took a breath. That my program, my face, my name was used. Not by me, but by people who saw me as a tool. They slipped in people I didn't vet. They directed money I never touched. I trusted the wrong hands. Rain fell softly over Washington, D.C. as Marissa Klein stepped out of her cab and into the underground parking garage of an old brick building near DuPont Circle. The meeting was last minute, unlisted and secret. Her source code, named Icarus, had reached out through an encrypted channel, promising a final piece of the puzzle. Something that tied everything together. Gwyneth, Jennifer, Ralston, even the shadowy European firm in the leaked emails. As she descended the dim stairwell, Marissa clutched her shoulder bag tight. Inside it, the USB Lila had given her remained untouched since the CNN report. But now, her gut told her the stakes were rising faster than she could write. This was no longer a story about misused funds. It was about something else, something bigger. At the bottom level, a man in his 60s stood beside a pillar. Worn blazer, unshaved beard, eyes alert but weary. It's Icarus, he said plainly. Marissa didn't speak. She only nodded. I used to run asset integration for SenLogic, he continued. We weren't just energy consultants. We were geopolitical analysts. We studied how to influence emerging democracies without firing a single bullet. He handed her a small case. Inside, more flash drives, a printed dossier, and one photograph. It showed Jennifer Lopez on stage at a women's empowerment forum in Nicaragua, flanked by her NGO team. In the background, barely visible, was the American operative from the Lila recordings. Not in disguise, not hidden, standing at ease. That photo's from last year, Icarus said. But that guy, it's not supposed to exist. Marissa scanned the dossier. The name listed was Eli Brandt, formerly with the NSA, officially deceased since 2016. Yet here he was, working as logistics advisor for Ralston in Jennifer's field team. He was embedded, Icarus said. They used your girl to move assets and build trust with local leaders. Lopez never saw it. It kept her focused on press, awards, staged empowerment moments, all while mapping the region's new lithium corridors. Marissa's voice cracked. This was never about women's leadership. It never is, Icarus replied. It was about minerals, influence, and access. Always is. By the time Marissa returned to her hotel, she found her email flooded. Multiple media outlets now wanted to interview Jennifer Lopez. Rumors had begun swirling that she was preparing to testify before the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But that wasn't all. Jennifer's new organization, Moogers Libris, had announced an international summit in São Paulo. Invitations were already sent to Brazilian, Colombian, and Chilean lawmakers. And Jennifer herself was expected to keynote the launch, flanked by grassroots activists and whistleblowers. The State Department was panicking. An internal memo leaked to Politico that night showed senior officials arguing whether to publicly support or distance themselves from Jennifer's efforts. One line from the Secretary of State stood out. We cannot risk Lopez openly naming American contractors in Latin America without a diplomatic firewall. Back in New York, Gwyneth Paltrow hosted a silent auction fundraiser for clean energy. In Morocco, the press was polite but distant now. Cameras caught her arriving alone, and no officials from the Biden administration were seen attending. Questions followed her down every hallway. What did you know? When did you know it? Her reply never changed. I did what I thought was necessary. But her control was slipping. That same night, Jennifer met with Lila Mendoza in a private Brooklyn apartment. No cameras, no handlers. Just the two of them, and a quiet air of exhausted determination. I never meant to hurt anyone, Jennifer said softly. But I can't keep apologizing for what I didn't do. I can't stay quiet while others use me. Lila nodded. Then say it. Say it out loud. 2 days later, Jennifer appeared, live on BBC World News. She looked directly into the camera and began, I was used. My name, my voice, my reputation. They called it diplomacy. But it wasn't. It was control dressed in empowerment. I now know that individuals inside my NGO worked with intelligence contractors I never authorized. I also know those same contractors influenced who received help, which villages got investment and which did not. That was not my mission. That was someone else's. Her voice didn't tremble. I've spent my life being careful, being polite, playing roles. But now I'm going to be loud. I'm calling for an independent international inquiry into foreign interference in humanitarian programs. And if the United States government won't do it, I'll take it to the UN General Assembly myself. The segment cut across the globe in real time. In Brussels, European Parliament members demanded hearings on the role of Swedish and British energy contractors in Latin America. In Washington, 2 senators introduced emergency legislation to tighten transparency for diplomatic ambassadors, including celebrity appointments. Gwyneth Paltrow was subpoenaed. A week later, she sat in front of Congress, her team stone-faced. Behind her, Representative Valerie Mason began the questioning. Paltrow, you were given diplomatic access to confidential intelligence, and within weeks, you made public statements that directly triggered global protests and internal investigations. Were you acting under instruction? Gwyneth leaned forward. I acted on conscience. Were you briefed on the activities of SynLogic or Ralston Strategic Group? Gwyneth hesitated. I declined to answer that on the advice of counsel. Gasps filled the room. Outside, Jennifer stood behind a podium in D.C. holding a press conference. "There are people who will try to silence this moment," she said. "They will call it politics, call it confusion. But I see it clearly now. This wasn't a feud. This wasn't drama. This was a warning that women, that leaders, that anyone trying to do good in the world can be turned into a pawn unless they ask who's really pulling the strings." She stepped back. No questions. Just a steady exit as the crowd watched, silent and wide-eyed. In a dark office in Geneva, investigators stared at a new email dump from an anonymous source. It contained files dating back 3 years, maps, coded memos, blacked-out names. The subject line read, "Operation Lumen, Strategic Deployment via Civilian Influence." Attached was a single line. She was never supposed to find out, but she had. Okay? And the world would never be the same. It was a bright morning in São Paulo. But the mood at the international summit was heavy with anticipation. Security was tight. Reporters had flown in from over 20 countries. Jennifer Lopez, once dismissed as just a pop icon, was now stepping onto the global stage, not as a performer, but as a whistleblower. The marble conference hall of the Latin American Women's Coalition buzzed with energy. Outside, crowds chanted her name. Protesters carried banners that read, "Truth has no uniform and no more puppet diplomacy." The event had been organized in just 2 weeks, but it felt like a movement years in the making. Inside, Jennifer stood backstage, staring at her reflection in the mirror. No makeup artists, no handlers, just her and a folder of final notes. Karina stood behind her, pale and tense. "The French delegation just arrived. They want to meet with you after the speech." Also, the Washington Post just published an op-ed titled "The Woman Who Cracked the Game." "You've become Jennifer," raised a hand gently. "Let's get through the speech first." Moments later, she stepped into the spotlight. Cameras flashed. Dozens of diplomats and civil society leaders rose to their feet. But Jennifer's face remained calm, her voice steady. "This is not about me," she began. "This is about every woman who stepped into a room thinking she was there to help only to learn she was being used." She paused. "For years, I lent my face to a program I believed in. I didn't know that buried inside it were covert actors manipulating communities, mapping resource zones, and influencing elections under the banner of empowerment. I didn't know, but now I do." The room was silent. "In the past few days, evidence has emerged linking private intelligence contractors, Western energy firms, and elements within diplomatic institutions to operations designed to appear humanitarian. But were anything but?" She lifted the folder. "Here are recordings, invoices, names. You'll find embedded operatives tied to disbanded agencies. You'll find people who turned aid into a backdoor for exploitation. I'm submitting this to an international inquiry, and I will testify wherever I'm called." Thunderous applause erupted. Somewhere in London, Gwyneth Paltrow watched the broadcast alone. She was no longer speaking to press. Her team had gone quiet. Her diplomatic title had been quietly revoked. An email leaked days earlier showed she had received a classified intelligence memo 4 days before her now infamous appearance on The View. The memo included detailed warnings about SenLogic and Ralston operations in Latin America. The email was marked "Do Not Disclose." She had, in Washington, the congressional inquiry had expanded into a full-blown investigation. Testimony revealed that the State Department had fast-tracked her security clearance without protocol. Internal memos showed Gwyneth had met with a Norwegian intelligence advisor 1 week before the show. Back at CNN, Anderson Cooper broke the story that Gwyneth had received compensation from a European green tech coalition that stood to benefit from destabilizing Latin American mining competitors. The implication was brutal. Gwyneth's outburst on live TV might have been more than moral conscience, it may have been business. That night, Marissa Klein prepared the final part of her investigative series. It was titled "The Celebrity Weapon." A heavy fog rolled over Geneva as diplomats filed into the UN headquarters for the emergency tribunal session. Security was tripled. Snipers watched from rooftops. Protesters stood in silence outside, holding candles not out of grief, but out of solidarity. Inside, tension pulsed like a second heartbeat in every corridor. Jennifer Lopez arrived quietly through a side entrance. No entourage, no flash. Just her, Karina Alvarez, and an armful of sealed folders. She wore a simple black suit. Her expression was steady, composed, but not numb. She had made peace with what was coming, whatever that meant. This would not be a court of law, but a court of truth. The tribunal had been formed from an alliance of Latin American, African, and Southeast Asian nations, the goal to uncover how humanitarian systems were infiltrated by covert operations. Masked as development work, Jennifer took her seat at the front of the hall. Across from her sat Gwyneth Paltrow. Dressed in cream, she looked like she belonged anywhere but here. A former actress turned climate envoy turned central figure in a global scandal. She nodded slightly in Jennifer's direction. It wasn't an apology, more like surrender. The first witness was Marissa Klein.com and methodical. She presented a clear timeline. 2018, Jennifer Lopez launches Women in the Rise, AU Unpartnered. Program focused on Latin American empowerment. 2019, Ralston Strategic Group enters as a subcontractor, approved quietly by mid-level officials. 2020 to 2023, field activity in rural regions aligns with spikes in foreign-controlled mining permits. 2023, Gwyneth receives intelligence briefings related to security risks. 2025, she goes public, triggering a geopolitical media war. Then came the recordings. The tribunal heard voices plotting under the surface of goodwill, conversations about using Lopez's access to bypass government red tape, about mapping potential disruption zones under the cover of aid. The evidence was damning not because it showed Jennifer complicit, but because it showed how she was targeted. Her name was the bait. Her fame was the weapon. Jennifer stood to speak. The chamber fell silent. I trusted the system, she began. I thought I was helping people. I didn't know that behind my meetings, behind my press tours, there were plans being drawn that had nothing to do with justice. Her voice didn't shake. They built a mirror around me, showing me what I wanted to see. While behind it, they did what they came to do: steal resources, manipulate communities, and blame it all on good intentions. She turned to the delegation. Today, I'm asking not just for justice. I'm asking for structural change. Strip these programs of secrecy. End celebrity diplomacy without transparency. And for every woman who wants to change the world, teach her to ask who built the stage she's standing on. Applause rose slowly. Then, all at once, Gwyneth did not speak. Her lawyers had warned her any admission could be used in multiple jurisdictions. But as she left the chamber, she caught one final glimpse of Jennifer. And for a fleeting moment, she looked almost human again. Not the cold, controlled figure on The View, just someone who misjudged the game by week's end. The UN passed Resolution 3189, the Lopez Protocol. It demanded full public disclosure of private contractors in all humanitarian initiatives, banned intelligence agency ties in foreign aid operations, and established an international watchdog for celebrity-partnered programs. The United States abstained. So did the UK and Sweden. But the world moved anyway. Back in Los Angeles, Jennifer stood at the edge of her former world. Studios called again. Offers were made. Streaming giants begged for her story. She refused them all. I'm not a story, she said. I'm a warning. Instead, she opened a center in Bogota, not a Charitian institute. Women trained in law, in cybersecurity, in political advocacy. Real tools. Real protection. Karina became its co-director. Marissa joined as lead investigator. Layla Mendoza moved into an advisory role. One night, Jennifer hosted a small dinner in the courtyard of the Institute. No cameras, no speeches, just laughter, grilled corn, and music playing softly in the background. A girl from El Salvador approached her timidly. "Did they ever say sorry to you?" Jennifer smiled gently. "No," she said, "but the world said something better." "What's that?" "You were right to fight." Later, alone in her room, Jennifer pulled open a drawer and stared at the only thing she had kept from the scandal. A printed still from The View, showing the moment Gwyneth leaned in, the second before it all broke open. She turned the photo. Over on the back, she'd written one sentence: "Don't ever let the mirror fool you again." And then she put it away, because now she didn't need it.